Okay, so innovative campaigning actions is the title of today's session. We can see by the high level of interest that this is something that obviously lots of people are thinking about. So the objective today is to look at some ways of offering digital campaigning actions beyond the basic level actions of asking supporters to sign a petition or send a form email to their MP. But crucially, I'm not here to suggest that there's anything wrong with those. Gathering individual signatures of support and asking people to contact power holders directly are not going away as campaign tactics. And the reason that they're still around is because they are effective, they do work. An innovative action doesn't mean you have to be using the latest shiny bit of technology or have spent a lot of money on developing a new digital tool or a piece of content. I'm old enough to remember quite a few waves of different new bits of technology or new platforms that we've all kind of run around struggling to work out how we were going to use them. But if anybody has found out how you get campaign impact from organising a demo in Second Life or anything equivalent, I'd love to hear that story, and please post it in the chat. There'll be a chance to share kind of your experiences of novel and interesting things you've done later on. But innovation can be as simple as executing a tactic in a creative and thoughtful way, something that makes it stand out with your target or with your supporters or both. Because what actually makes a digital tactic work is usually much more mundane than is it innovative. It's those campaigning basics, your power analysis, your theory of change, your narrative. So every campaign action has to take into account what will influence a target or deliver change and what will motivate people to act and or make it easy for them to do so. So chasing the idea of new and shiny without that clear strategy can be risky, expensive and ineffective. So what I'll primarily be doing today is highlighting ways to change up your digital campaigning tactics to make them more effective. So, but obviously if anybody does have a story of how they're using TikTok or ChatGPT to deliver campaign impact, we'll be eager to hear it at the end. So what do we mean by effective? Normally, when we're offering supporters digital actions, we're trying to achieve two things: move forward our campaigns by influencing a power holding target, either directly by providing them with information or evidence or policy solutions, or indirectly by demonstrating support for your issue or solution from the public or from a stakeholder group. And we do that by engaging people and persuading them to take some kind of online action. And the sweet spot in the middle is that ask of what they're being asked to do. So we're balancing these two sets of needs with your own organization's needs, which might be to give your supporters something to do, to keep them engaged, to build your list. And sometimes these objectives align, but often they're in tension. So for every action, you need to understand what your supporter and target audiences need, how you're going to meet those needs, and often which you're going to prioritize in which circumstances. All of the example actions I'll be showing today were built using More Onion's campaigning and fundraising platform Impact Stack, but the ideas I'm talking about are really transferable, whatever technology that you're using. There'll be a chance for follow-up questions about the individual actions at the end. There are campaigners here from most of the organisations that I'm featuring today. So you can post your questions in the chat as we go along, as they occur to you. But if you prefer to keep the chat closed so that you can focus, feel free to note your questions down, and there'll be a point where we'll pause at the end for you to post them in the chat and we can direct them to the right person. All the slides, the recording and the chat log will be circulated after today's session, and we'll include links to all of the actions which are still live so you can take a closer look at those. So we'll start with some ideas about how to make simple actions more engaging and accessible. So a really simple idea: offer information within the page to support somebody taking the action. So a campaign action is always a balancing act between telling your supporters everything and overloading them, and oversimplifying things. So oversimplifying things might annoy your supporters by patronizing them, but it's also likely to lead your target to take your action less seriously and even undermine your organization's credibility if they suspect that most of the people signing the petition don't really understand what they're being asked to do. You also don't want to link somebody away from your carefully crafted action page to get lost in your website or a lengthy PDF download. Hidden and pop-up text can be a good way of helping you provide extra info and context. And here I'm going to show you a couple of examples. Claire, I can see your hand up. Is there an issue?
Just a quickie. Do you mind speaking a little bit more slowly for us?
I will do my best. My Welsh fast talking is getting the better of me. Thank you, Claire. I will endeavour to slow down and be reminded, obviously, we do have people on the call today who are not first language English speakers, and I need to be a bit more mindful. Thank you. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples of hidden and pop-up text to allow you to provide extra information in context. So on this action from Free Tibet, the petition text itself is tucked away. You can click and reveal it and hide it again, so that people can be really focused on the compelling call to action, why you have to sign the petition or why it's an important action to take, rather than the technical details of what's actually being said to the CEO of Thermo Fisher, asking them to stop selling DNA kits to the Chinese authorities in Tibet. We'll be circulating links to all of these actions so you can explore them in more detail. So this petition from Shelter asks people to call on the government to take action that it's already promised on renters' rights. So this kind of pop-out accordion allows Shelter to provide more information on what the legislation will mean without raining down the page with an awful lot of information, or directing people off to additional information elsewhere where they might not find their way back. So another idea, collect comments on a petition. Give people something additional to do. So a campaign target needs to know that the people taking your action understand and are engaged with the issue. So one way to show this is to collect something a bit more than yes, I agree from people. So again, Shelter, this action asking the Conservative government to follow through on this promised action on the housing crisis had quite an interesting life, because it started off being a wish you were here summer message to Boris Johnson, became a message to the next Prime Minister for quite a while, and then briefly a message to Liz Truss during the short period that she was Prime Minister. So collecting a short message reinforced the whole concept of sending a postcard, which originally was a bit more developed with the kind of early summer Boris Johnson version. The kind of wish you were here sentiment of well, you know, you don't wish you were in this terrible housing. But the short message reinforced that idea of a postcard that you might send with a short message on it, carried through in the artwork and the copy. And then the messages were also displayed on the thank you page. So if I do another click, we'll see this, collect the message. And then the messages are also displayed on the thank you page so people could see what messages other people had chosen to include, reinforcing that sense that you're part of a movement. You know, it's not just you speaking up, and you can see what other people are saying about the issue. So you can do the same thing with an email to target action. So if you're asking supporters to write directly to a target, you'll be balancing trying to make sure they say the things that you want, with the need to demonstrate to the target that your supporters are really engaged with this issue and really care about it. So you could offer people the chance to edit a draft message, but most people won't change it, particularly if your draft message is super technical, or if you're asking them to email multiple targets. They're not going to go through and write personal emails to the 5 different people you've asked them to send a message to. So one way of making this easier is to ask people a simple direct question and add the answer to the message to the target. So here's an example. World Animal Protection ran an action, are running, I think it's still live, targeting holiday company TUI, asking them to stop selling tickets to captive dolphin attractions. So ads targeting holiday customers and TUI staff directed them to this email to target page, where they were asked, now that you know that TUI profits from the suffering of dolphins, what do you want to tell them? An amazing 75% of people put in some form of personal message here, some of them short, some of them long, and those messages were included in the email which TUI received. So here's my message, and here it is in the message that's going to be sent to TUI. I think it was the booking inquiries email. So in this example from Friends of the Earth, supporters are asked to share why they care about the right to protest. So the suggested text in the box means that something will be added to the message, even if they choose not to add something personal. And it also gives people a clear idea of what kind of statement is expected here, which hopefully would build their confidence to add something themselves. So here's my message. And here it is in the message that I might be sending to my, well, it's not my MP actually, but just as a test. So another idea, offer people a choice. People really like it. So the shelter action we looked at earlier, the postcard, offered people the choice of 4 different postcard versions. linked together so that whichever one you took, the cumulative number, the social proof showed a number of all of the postcards that had been sent, not just the version that you'd chosen. And this For Paws action asked supporters to contact the Vietnam tourism minister to highlight how the trade in dog and cat meat can endanger public health and in turn negatively impact the tourist industry. As well as different language versions, it offers a choice to send a dog version or a cat version of the postcard with beautiful artwork focused on positive animal-human relationships. And this one was also available in multiple translations, all linked together for a cumulative total. The action, or the multiple versions of the actions, got over 13,000 responses from concerned citizens across the world, including the UK, USA, South Africa, and Austria. And the postcards were presented to Vietnamese government officials at an in-person stakeholder event, including medical professionals and tourism companies. And because I know you're going to ask, cat postcards beat dog postcards. Apparently, South African supporters heavily favoured the cat one. Here's how the postcards were delivered. And here's another example of that offering a choice. This action from ocean climate campaigners Fish offered a choice of postcard artwork to send to EU fisheries ministers during the COP27 climate conference, collecting over 1,100 personal messages. Another reason to offer choice, to introduce some variety into the messages that you're sending. So in the examples we just looked at, the message and the ask were basically the same, but you could use the same technique to direct people to entirely different versions of an action with different message copy for your target, if variety would help make it more effective. So that's potentially a lot of work though, so you can use choices within an action to introduce variety into the message. For example, this action from anti-poverty charity Trussell Trust allows users to pick which of a list of essentials they'd like to highlight in a message to their MP, drawing attention to the fact that the cost of living crisis and the social security system are leaving many people struggling to afford the essentials that we all need. The chosen essential was added to the message text as a token, as well as their personal message, meaning any individual MP received varied messages according to what supporters chose to highlight. This action had a physical postcard equivalent distributed via food banks and using the same artwork to reinforce the idea that it was the same action, just in different form. And another reason to offer choice to make your action more targeted. So one size fits all often won't be the most effective. So you can offer choice to enable people to take the action that's most effective or most relevant for them. So in the UK, that might mean considering the devolved administrations of Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. In this action for Baby Loss Awareness Week, Baby Loss charity Sands offered 4 different actions with a landing page that filtered supporters to the right version according to where they live in the UK and asked them to contact their MP, their member of the Senedd, their member of the Scottish Parliament, or the member of the Legislative Assembly in Northern Ireland accordingly. Alternatively, you might have specific subgroups whose voices might be particularly important. So in this example from World Animal Protection, they campaigned for over 2 years to stop one of the UK's last reptile markets held at Doncaster Racecourse. At each event, thousands of captive bred wild animals were suffering trapped in tiny plastic boxes. So they knew that the venue and the local council who provided the licensing for the event would be more influenced by local voices. So one action targeted the racecourse management and asked people if they lived near Doncaster and added this information to the message. And a second action used postcode to filter supporters to 2 different versions of the action. So people local to the racecourse were put in touch with their ward councillor using the postcode map councillors data set that comes within Impact Stack for UK clients. And others were redirected to an action directly targeting the Doncaster mayor. And so this is the filter that would direct people to a different action if based on the postcode. So it might be driven by location, expertise, or experience, or something else. But every issue and every target will have certain groups who they'll be more influenced by, which takes us to our next idea, which is tailoring the action around the target. No one likes to be asked to do something they can't do, or harangued about doing something that they've already done. It's a good idea to set your actions up so that as far as possible, you're not encouraging supporters to contact targets for whom the action isn't relevant, and that you're taking into account who the target is as an individual. So that might mean sending a different message to a relevant minister or to an opposition backbencher, acknowledging a particular party's position or an individual's existing activity. So, for example, Young Minds is currently asking supporters in England to invite their MP to attend a parliamentary briefing on youth mental health. So there's a message up front to let people know that it's just for England with a pop-up explanation. And anyone going ahead and entering a non-England postcode will be prevented from contacting their MP. So their MP isn't going to get an irrelevant invitation. And the user is offered an explanation of why. But hopefully they'll have been steered away up front and not been kind of persuaded to enter data into a form that's not relevant to them. So they'll get this kind of message explaining why the action isn't relevant. But as well as that filtering to take out people for whom the action is not useful, there are also tailored versions of the invitation for particular groups and key individuals with relevant roles. So the action also has pop-up messaging tips so that supporters can craft a personal message section of the invitation. So the rights action from Friends of the Earth, England, Wales and Northern Ireland that we looked at earlier has a filter set up to exclude Scotland because the organisation doesn't work there. Another filter to explain to people whose MPs are suspended or who don't take up their seats in Parliament why they can't take the action, and a tailored message for Labour MPs asking them to press for protecting for the right to protest to go into the Labour manifesto for the next election. So here are the filters, and here's an example of what that filter looks like and the message that the user would get if they're matched to an MP. A Sinn Féin MP, they don't take up a seat in Parliament, so they're steered away from this action. So poor MPs. Let's think about how we could target somebody different. So it's sometimes easy to fall back on email to MP type actions because the data and tools are available. But if they're not the right target right now, this doesn't help your campaign, and it certainly doesn't help poor MPs to do the best job that they could be doing. So save MP contacts when you really do have something for them to do, and use your power analysis to think about who else is in a position to affect change for your issue. And if you work in the UK on devolved issues such as health, education, or the environment, you need to think obviously about how you approach Westminster MPs around those issues and whether you should be contacting the devolved elected representatives instead. We've seen examples already of actions with a custom target, such as World Animal Protection targeting TUI, or for Paws contacting the Vietnamese tourism minister. As well as tailoring actions to different UK nations, as we saw above, SANS created an action targeting the chief executives of hospital trusts and health boards in England and Wales to ask them to invest in bereavement care training for their staff. So we work with them on a bespoke data set and functionality for this. There's no postcode mapping readily available for this group of targets. So we worked on the basis that while people don't know the name of their hospital trust or their health board, they do know the name of a local hospital. So people could start typing the name of the hospital, find a match, and then be connected with the right local target. Over 1,000 emails were sent, reaching 92% of the trusts and boards which provide maternity services, and around half responded to the emails, and some of the boards have followed up directly about how SANS can help them improve their bereavement care training. This action from Shelter takes a similar technical approach with an autocomplete field. It encourages supporters to send a letter to the editor to a local newspaper to highlight the need for renters' rights and that these policies will influence voting intentions at the next election. Supporters could start typing to see a list of possible titles that matched and then pick the publication they wanted to contact. A prompt offered them the chance to add a personal message to the template email. And there was also an additional view message step to make sure that supporters really understood that their message might be published. Over 200 letters have been sent and at least 46 have been published so far. This action from Friends of the Earth targets local councils across England, Wales and Northern Ireland to ask them to take their pension investments out of climate harming funds. You can also, as you can see, take the action in Welsh. It has filters set up for councils which have already committed to do this, so that supporters get a friendly message telling them the news is good, they don't need to contact their council, and councillors don't get emails asking them to do something they've already done. So here are the filters. And here's the message that you would get if you happen to live in Lambeth or Cardiff or one of these councils where they've already taken action. We also work with Shelter on this action, targeting members of the House of Lords. So the introduction of a social housing regulation bill was a key opportunity for Shelter to promote its goals around social housing. Unusually, this bill started its journey through the parliamentary system in the Lords. And that meant that getting in touch with peers, so for those of you not in the UK, that's the second chamber of our Parliament, members of the House of Lords, was an important early chance to influence the content of this piece of legislation. Now, lobbying Lords is much trickier than members of Parliament, the Commons, because while everybody has an MP elected to represent the constituency where they live, the Lords don't represent any particular location, and there's no reason for a member of the public to contact one rather than any other. And not all Lords take any active part in parliamentary business. So what we did, Shelter uploaded a custom contact data set of active peers, and we built some new functionality within Impact Stack, which simply matched each supporter with a peer at random within that data set, providing them with a template letter highlighting Shelter's suggested amendments to the bill and linking to a detailed briefing from Shelter's policy team. And that randomized target functionality is now available to anyone using Impact Stack. So over 4,300 emails were sent to peers, and while Shelter's preferred amendments weren't voted through this time, there was a lively discussion with Shelter and Grenfell United's key points being raised in the debate, and the amendments have subsequently been added to the bill and are getting good support from MPs as the bill makes its way through the Commons. So it was a really effective action that hit a lot of goals. Now, I really want to put a proviso in here. The takeaway from this should not be, yay, we can start spamming the Lords instead of MPs. One of the reasons this action was so effective is that peers are not accustomed to contact from the public. So if this tactic were to be overused, it will very likely not only become effective, it could even be blocked, because peers are not obliged to deal with the public in the way that MPs are. The real reason this action was so effective, though, was because it was strategically spot on. It was the right target at the right time when the Lords were about to debate the bill. And crucially, it offered real value to the target with clear actions that they were being asked to take and a very high quality briefing, which many peers clearly did read and drew on in the debate. So here's the match to a peer at random. So beyond the action, making good use of the information that you collect. So closing and handing in a petition can be an important moment to gain visibility, feedback to supporters, and so do consider how you can make the most of it. So in this example, our fish handed in their petition to the European Commission in the form of this beautiful artwork with the signers' names around the edge. And later in the year, their supporters' COP27 postcards messages were printed on one of the 3 postcard designs and handed in to the Commissioner, Sinkevicius, I believe, the Commissioner for Environment, Oceans and Fisheries in Brussels. But beyond making your petition hand-in more compelling, collecting more and deeper information and testimony from people might actually be the point of the art action in the first place. So this action by Eurodis is, they're an international alliance of organisations representing people with rare diseases. So this action, which was in 23 different languages, collected over 2,000 personal reasons for action on rare diseases. So these reasons have been published on a dedicated campaign webpage where they can be browsed by country and by theme. And they were also turned into a book, which was presented to the EU Commissioner, selected MEPs, health ministers around Europe, and even the Pope. They also drew on those statements for localized briefings for MEPs before an important European debate, meaning that the MEPs could reference case studies from their own countries in the debate. And the personal statements they've collected continue to have a value in their campaigning well beyond the closing of this specific online action. As part of their campaigning for more and better social housing, Shelter asked supporters to share stories of how social housing had helped them. Nearly 200 people did, ranging from one line to long personal stories. And additional work engaging directly with those supporters allowed Shelter to turn those into 39 shareable case studies, which we used on social media and in a presentation at a parliamentary event to support a positive case for social housing as a solution to the housing crisis. So World Animal Protection are making the most of those personal comments they collected in that action we looked at earlier. So as well as sending really personalised emails to their target, TUI, they're sharing a compilation of messages in a short social media video, which is being pushed out on social media channels this week, as it was the TUI AGM on Tuesday, highlighting in a very public way why they should pull out of supporting captive dolphin entertainment. So sending messages directly to a target via email might get a target's attention, but it's not always going to be the right way to influence them. Support from councils is really important for Shelter's campaign for renters' rights, because they will need to help administer the new powers that the legislation they're calling for will bring in. So the government needs to see the councils are on board and that their buy-in is vital for the implementation to succeed once the changes become law. But Shelter knew that a mass email campaign would actually be very difficult for councils to deal with the volumes that Shelter supporters can generate. And it actually risked alienating them when this was an audience they wanted to bring on board. So we worked with Shelter to build an additional action type, a new action type in Impact Stack, which works in the same way as our email to target tool, in that it uses supporters' postcodes to look up their counsellors and then collect their messages. But instead of immediately triggering individual emails, it simply stores the supporters' messages and data in Impact Stack for Shelter to deliver at a later date. So this action gained over 6,000 signatures in the 3 weeks that it was live and provided local names and support for an open letter, which Shelter were able to deliver to every relevant council in England. So within a few months, a third of English councils were on record as supporting the policy change, including councils led by different political parties. So we've now extended this functionality into a new Impact Stack feature, which we're calling Match to Target, which can be used with any data set, our postcode map data sets, or any custom data set you add yourself. So if you're an Impact Stack client, you'd like to know more, just reach out to us. James from Shelter shared a much more detailed case study of this action at a previous event, and I'll share the recording of that in the follow-up email after today. So, and another action type, asking supporters to take part in consultations can be really effective. This is, after all, a moment where a body, a government, a company, another kind of public body is specifically asking for input. But public consultations can actually often be quite off-putting or technical and quite difficult for members of the public to engage with. So your action can potentially make it easier for people to participate and make their views heard. So you might be able to help them generate an email into the consultation process or collect submissions to match the consultation's questions. We have a whole free report on consultation actions, which draws on case studies kindly shared by Shelter, Friends of the Earth, Young Minds, RSPCA Cymru, Woodland Trust and others. Again, we'll share that in the follow-up information. But just to highlight a couple of recent examples of consultation-related actions. So this action from our fish cuts the consultation down to the relevant and the mandatory questions. So instead of having to deal with the whole thing and lots of questions that they probably wouldn't want to engage with, it allowed people to really focus on the stuff that they could engage with. It provides contextual tips, the kind of pop-up text that we've seen before, and also adds a statement to their message based on their response to a yes/no question. And this action from Friends of the Earth really pushes the boat out with multiple steps and conditions, with a view to generating lots of different personalised submissions. Over 2,000 people filled it in, taking an average of 20 minutes over it. And it's a good example of prioritising unique messages over volume. So when Friends of the Earth ask their supporters to send a pre-written email, they might expect something like 15 to 20,000 people to do that. But because this was such a high bar action, they weren't really expecting more than a few hundred super committed supporters to take this action. But the step-by-step customization obviously did really make it more accessible and compelling, generating really significant numbers of unique consultation submissions. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail of how this was done because it's immensely complicated, and it really deserves a whole case study of its own, which I hope our friends at Friends of the Earth will share with us at some point. But the message template here gives you a sense of the complexity and the work that goes into doing this. But the payoff of 2,000 unique personalized responses into a consultation, I think, is really impressive. Obviously, that has been a very brisk gallop through a number of different examples of ways to take your actions a little bit beyond the basics. So really special thanks to the organisations who very kindly agreed for me to share their actions today. And I'm sure you've got lots of questions for them. So even if you're already applying lots of these ideas already, I hope that they've offered you some inspiration and some insight. But if what you're looking for is some help with really blue sky idea generation, we do have something additional for you too. So the Impact Stack campaign tactic generator contains a list of campaign tactics and possible hook opportunities to generate novel combinations. So it's a really fun thing to use to try and break out of a creative block or slump, or to prompt discussion at a team meeting or a planning ideation session. We'd love to hear your feedback on it and your suggestions of additional tactics to add. So I'm hoping one of my colleagues will be plopping a link to that into the chat as we speak.